Hi again. Yesterday I did a little talk on how to plan and write a classical studies essay to help anyone who wanted to knuckle down and learn about classical studies, and also it helps with any essay writing. That wasn't just for classical studies, even that was its context. It helps with any kind of academic work, being able to structure, plan and write an essay that could be on any subject. But one thing occurred to me after I was reflecting upon that essay was that I didn't give any thought to the trends of scholarship which have emerged over several hundred years, sometimes even thousands of years, throughout classical studies as a discipline. That is, the way in which history has been studied and written and received, and the way in which it is studied today. Now, I might not agree with the way which things have gone, which have taken a very mundane, grounded, very blinkered, in my view, way. And it's not just, I'm not alone in this. There are beings, particularly the Shemhamphoresh, which disagree with the way mankind has gone, but that's the way man has gone. And that is the way in which the subject is studied today. So if you're aiming at top marks, rather than believing the truth, then this is what you need to do. You need to toe the line. Noam Chomsky once said, and he holds like several degrees, like scores of degrees, I think over 20 degrees. He said, education is just jumping through hoops. So when they say jump, you say how high. And it doesn't matter whether you believe in God, or you are, as I am, a henotheist. I'm a Christian henotheist. That means I believe in one supreme being, but also an angelic hierarchy of thrones, dominions, powers, and so forth, angels and archangels, the cherubim and the seraphim. That doesn't mean anything to the university system, because on the whole, they're atheists. They're grounded in reality. God is a social construct, the sky is a social construct, and I'm going to explain to you how we've arrived at this cul-de-sac of intellectual blinkered nonsense, and what you need to do as a student if you want to be given a double first. And it doesn't matter the truth is not important, that doesn't concern these people. All they're concerned about is materialism. That's it, that's their world. There is nothing beyond the material. They do not believe in any realms as Hermeticists do. They don't believe in any of that. Like E.R. Dodds, for example, is an excellent example. He was a great classicist that devoted his life to studying the paranormal. But he himself never said that he believed in the paranormal. He always remained a skeptic, so that he had acceptance within the academic community. Now, it may have been that E.R. Dodds did believe in it. In fact, he probably did, because he devoted his entire life to the study of the paranormal. But he could never say that he believed in it, because then he would have no authority among the people that are his peers and his contemporaries. It's a bit like that Ghostbusters movie, the one I quite like, the one with the chicks in, you know, that got a flop, but I actually thought it was really cool. If you say you believe in the paranormal, you will never get anywhere in any academia, because these people are purely living in the mundane. They have no concern with anything that's other than material. They are just materialists, and that's all they're concerned with. They're not concerned with anything that is broad-minded or bordering on philosophy. They only know what you can see and touch and taste and smell, and that is it. And I'm going to explain to you how we've arrived to this. So, when I first started studying, this is one of the wonderful modules I studied, and this is a brand new module. It was designed just as I came onto the course, interestingly. Just about a year after I started university, a brand new course came out, and it was a lovely course. Can't study it anymore. And it was called Making Sense of Things, an Introduction to Material Culture. And on that course, we discovered people like that were influential in the history of classical studies and in archaeology and material culture, people like Franz Boas, who was a very influential anthropologist, people like Branislaw Malinowski, people like Henry Fox Augustus Pitt Rivers, Fox Lane Pitt Rivers, people like Henry Louis Morgan and his unilinear theory of evolution, and these were touched upon, and we did little case studies on them. And then there's a nice little book you can pick up, and it is grounded in pure science, but it's this one here, Archaeology, an introduction by Kevin Green. This is its 4th edition. It's been through many editions, and there's a summary table of how we've arrived, and this is purely from a scientific but materialist perspective. So this has nothing to do with truth or philosophy or magic or any of the deeper mysteries that you'll discover after you graduate from university and you realise that university was just the first little step on a very deep ladder, a very tall ladder that goes unto the stars, not unlike Jacob's ladder mentioned in the Bible and described by Joseph and Balaam and Jehoshaphat. Okay, so the first one is the Enlightenment. Now, Hermeticists call this the Enlightenment, and the reason we use inverted commas is because it wasn't really enlightened, because it's basically the same view that we have today, which is everything's grounded in reality and that there's nothing that exists that isn't material, and that the only thing that exists are the rocks and the trees and the stones, and that's it. And that's the same view we have today. So it hasn't actually gone anywhere. That's what they view, and any religious views are just seen as like kind of superstition, right? And that was the Enlightenment. That's the 18th century, post-Renaissance, and that's David Hume, Diderot, that's Kant, Stukeley, Winckelmann, excellent art historian Winckelmann, very well worth studying. And its impact upon the study of archaeology was the expansion of scientific recording and classification of artifacts in the world. And this includes human antiquities, but also natural artifacts. And there were some precursors to this, because what this table doesn't tell you is the scientific method, which was very, 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 very important, and it still is important. But it's only one half of the whole. It's science, and there's the other forgotten half, which is art and religion and mysticism and all that is true and good and beautiful. But now they only see science. Same as the Enlightenment. They only see the science. They don't see God. God does not exist. God is a social construct, and if you mention anything like that, you'll get marked down, because these people only believe in materialism, and that's all they believe in. So, the scientific method was actually pioneered by Aristotle in a book he wrote called The Analytics, and that was the first expose, really, of an early scientific method. There are traces of Darwinism in the writings of Empedocles, and even in Cicero. He quotes the poet Ennius in his book De Natura Deorum, on the nature of the gods. They won't tell you that on Wikipedia. So there are traces of the scientific method and the scientific Darwinist kind of view going way back into antiquity, but these were really the exceptions. They weren't the norm. People used to be drowned for being atheists back in those days at certain points during history. Then you had people like Galileo, you had people like Giordano Bruno, another pioneering scientist. That guy who I said was a charlatan, he knows all about him. He can't speak Latin, and all of his books are in Latin or Italian, but he knows all about him. Go figure. Then we have someone called Robert Boyle, and also before that Sir Francis Bacon, and Copernicus also made a very excellent contribution to the way in which we see the material world. So there was a vast trajectory of the scientific method, and none of that's mentioned in this little summary table here. So after the 18th century Enlightenment and the preponderance of scientific thought, archaeology and classical studies goes through another change, which is from Romanticism. Now, there was a module I should have studied called From Enlightenment to Romanticism, because I myself am a romantic. I tend to be a metaphysician and a poet. So I very much belong to the Romantic movement, not the Enlightenment movement, because I'm a believer, a true believer. I'm not someone that only sees the mundane. But my feelings are neither here or there. It's the academic community that is most important, because that's how you get top marks, that's how you get a good job, and that's how you get on in the world. Don't bother with any things like truth or philosophy or magic when you go to university. They don't want to hear about those things. Those are from a time before they existed. That's from the Renaissance. These are other times. So the Romanticism was the late 18th and early 19th century, and that's people like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, excellent philosopher, really good. His Confessions are pretty naughty as well. Schelling and Hegel as well. And this is a reaction against the Enlightenment and rationality, its emotional attraction to wild landscapes and ancient peoples and the drama and the idea of le bon sauvage and mankind's progress. And then in the 19th and 20th century you have positivism, which is a continuation of the Enlightenment in preference for empiricism, naturalism and science rather than speculation. And this is the emergence of sociology. The intellectual atmosphere and reception of this development, it goes into geology, into biology. It leads into the evolutionary theory and study of early human origins. Comite was a pioneer of this. Then we have Darwinism in the 19th and 20th centuries. This adds the concept of natural selection. It adds a whole new scientific dimension. Extensively adopted as an analogy for explaining and justifying changes in societies, social Darwinism, and for the development of archaeological objects. And you have people like Pitt Rivers, Spencer, Darwin and Lamarck, and these are still heavyweights today. They're still basically what people study today. Marxism came along, bit old hat nowadays, but still prevalent in China, Russia, Serbia, places like that. Theory of social evolution derived from anthropological and ancient historical things that have an economic basis. Believe it or not, Karl Marx was actually an amazing economist, had a very keen understanding of the economy in his Das Kapital, even if he was railing against it, and also of society and social structures. He emphasized means for production. And there was a notion of revolutionary change, which comes from Friedrich Engels, which was one of his supported, they call him the frock-coated communist. And this was particularly important during the 20th century, when archaeologists tend to react positively and negatively against developments. Another very important person in the history of archaeology is Veres Gordon Childe, Child with an E, excavated Skara Brae in Scotland, wrote a number of excellent works, and particularly his What Happened in History, but also his theory of complex society, which is still with us today, and that gives you a criteria of what is a civilization. They don't tend to use the word civilization now. It's a bit naughty, apparently. It's supposed to say complex society, as though no society isn't complex. It doesn't actually help anything, just merely creates more problems, but that's where we've ended up. We're supposed to say complex society, so it's not so much of a loaded term. If you understand the etymology of society and complex, you understand it's a complete misnomer, but that's okay. That's where we're at. We're at the cul-de-sac and we have the blinkers on, and if you want to get top marks, you've got to do what they say. Remember, it's jumping through hoops. What they say, you do. If they say jump, you say how high. If they say jump through the ring of fire into the bucket of gasoline, you do it. That's what you do nowadays. Nationalism was a reaction to Marxism, and that's very much kind of like a right-wing kind of thing, a very patriotic kind of thing, a jingoistic kind of thing. Didn't really help archaeology at all. It's still with us today, very much with the museum system, places like Tunisia and Russia and other big totalitarian autocratic states. They like to massage the fact act to give back a national message, a bit like the BBC do, although to a lesser extent, but to a certain extent, they like to emphasise Britain's role in things, and they'll present the evidence in such a way that it highlights that Britain's the greatest nation on the planet. Okay, that's nationalism. Then we have modernism. I'm reading a book on this currently. Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead was given to me by my sister-in-law for Christmas. Excellent book, excellent book, excellent book. Now, I'm a believer in God. I'm a believer in classical studies, and I like the old ways. But I love this book, even if the main character is an atheist, hates the old ways and is anti-classical. But it's still a great book, and I understand that it's important in the history of the evolution of the subject of classical studies, is modernism did have an impact, and that was the culmination of the Enlightenment and positivist confidence in social progress and the belief in objective scientific thought. And this led up to the works of new archaeology, new quote unquote, in the 1980s, and this ended up with structuralism, which is the late 20th century, and this is an intellectual movement that related to superficial phenomena such as language, mythology, works of art, social institutions, and the underlying structure of language. I quite like structuralism, but it can be quite abstract and difficult to understand, but it is a good framework for understanding abstract concepts on a philosophical level. Levi Strauss is one of the champions, also Saussure and Barthes and Hodder, and this is particularly influential upon anthropology and therefore has an impact upon archaeology. Anthropology comes from anthropos, meaning the study of man. Then we have postmodernism, which is the late 20th century. It's breaking down of confidence in modernism and the grand narratives of social evolution, such as Marxism or nationalism, and related to post-structuralism, which denies fixed meanings, simple dichotomies, and the pursuit of truth. This is Friedrich Nietzsche, you have Foucault, encourages a highly personal archaeological outlook that suspects that all interpretations are based on supposedly objective observations are mere illusions reflecting the prevailing power of structures. So that was that, right? Then we have like a new section here which comes in, and that's kind of like post-processal archaeology. So we'd have processalism, which was like kind of Colin Renfrew and people, and this believes that there's a kind of like a cultural historical approach which is to do with the environmental data and the focus of rigorous scientific study. Then we have post-processal archaeology, which is basically where we're at now, which is a sophisticated interpretation borrowed from anthropological sources and applied to material culture. Then we have postmodern philosophy and the interpretive post-processal archaeology. I mean, on the continent, in Latin-speaking countries in South America and places, they don't tend to do all this abstract bullshit. What they do is they put the spade in the ground, and when they practice archaeology, they get back to basics. Now, I'm a big believer in that. I think there's no way you can find archaeological artifacts by talking abstract theories and philosophies. The way you find archaeological artifacts is by sticking the spade in the ground. But people in the English-speaking world seem to have forgotten this, and they think it's better to sit at the computer and talk shit all day, right? But I personally believe in hard work. I believe in mud. That's why I have very many archaeological artifacts, because while they're all talking about it, I'm actually fucking doing it. Anyway, they were found on public highways, so it's a semi-legal grey area, but that's okay. That's one very brief discourse into the history of the subject and how we've ended up in this mess, or not mess if you're a scientist, that we have today. And there's a couple of other bits I'd like to share with you, just to go on, because it goes even further than processal archaeology, which is what we have, and that's the material turn and the sensory turn. Now, there was a book a friend of mine gave me. He's an Arabic guy. He's a book dealer, and I gave him a book of the fall of Constantinople, and it was a primary account from an Italian physician that was healing the wounded there because he was a Muslim. I said, look, this should interest you, because it was to do with with his culture, the Ottomans, and in exchange he gave me this, which is a lovely book, Transactions of the Royal Historical Society, and I picked out one passage which I thought was important. Okay, and this is written 7 years ago, 150th anniversary of the Royal Historical Society, and the presidential address, which I believe is delivered by Margot C. Finn and I. Loot, odd name for a collector of antiquities, I. Loot, and it is Loot. And this person says, I use the phrase material turn in two linked senses, one related to material culture and the other to material or economic life. Since these 1980s, historians have increasingly turned to material objects as primary sources that can illuminate aspects of the past which we obscure if we attend to the textual evidence alone. Drawing from disciplines that include anthropology, archaeology, and sociology, we have found in material culture original records of the past and novel ways of explaining human behavior, blah 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 bullshit. A second type of material turn has ensued from historians growing disenchanted with the perceived excesses of linguistic and cultural analyses, the twin methodologies that increasingly supplant social and economic and political history writing from the 1980s onwards, tempering the claims of linguistic and cultural turns of these decades. Historians are now reclaiming and reforming traditions of materialistic history that developed in the Victorian era. So this is describing the material turn, how everything is now materialism. And quite often in academic papers, people who are supposed to have learnt their Latin and ancient Greek very conveniently and very quickly forget it all, and they just look at bits of broken wall and bits of bone, and they say, we can't believe anything anybody wrote in any of these books because we've found a little bit of broken wall. And to a certain extent that's true, because if you think of it as a piece of broken wall, it's only going to be a broken wall. But everything they say is interpretive and speculative, and there's no actual evidence of any of it, except if you find an inscription, so something like a brick stamp, or you find some kind of chemical analysis, such as thermoluminescent dating, or using natural anthropology, that's biological archaeology, which can show things like the marrow from someone's bones, or dental samples that show you what diet they had, or looking at coprolites and things like that. So there is an argument for material culture, and but it is only part of the whole. And there was a wonderful book, which is the Cambridge Ancient History of China. And at the start of that book, the scholar who wrote the preface said that there should be a well-balanced view and give equal weight to the primary sources from the linguistic sphere, but also the archaeology and the art history, so that things are nuanced. And this is the best way, is if you give equal weight. You don't just favour materialism and science over the art of ancient languages. You put them together and you marry them. That's the way it should be. So that's the material turn, and we've now gone right to the material. So everything's material now. Everything's material. Then there's another school of thought, and this is very much earlier, and this is written by a guy called R.C. Jebb, who had compiled a book, and this is a book of, as you can see, it's in a slightly different language to most people. This is in ancient Greek, this one. This is those are the writings of Lysias. We have Isaiah, we have, I think, some Cicero in here probably, or is it Isocrates? Yes, a very nice book, this Antiphon. So this is, about ancient orators. And this guy's writing hundreds of years ago. I mean, when was he writing here? Yeah, he's writing in 1880. He's writing in 1880, and he says, those who know that the province of Greek literature only through the medium of references in such valuable works as Becker's Charicles might be pardoned for supposing that the world of Attic orators was peopled by beings who existed solely in the interests of as of yet unborn archaeologists, that dinners plates, marriages, funerals, and striking emergencies of the wardrobes succeeded each other with a complete disregard of the probability, as placid and as complete as if the instructive lives of peoples had been prearranged by a board of archaeological studies. And I agree with this view. I don't think, and I don't believe for a second, that the ancients put broken pieces of pottery and artifacts into the ground just for the benefit of future archaeologists several thousand years later. I don't believe that. Archaeologists often talk as if they were put there for their benefit, as if they can explain everything away just because they belong to the material turn. And no, that wasn't the intention. It was probably a votive offering to the gods, for example. Or it may have been a marriage gift, or even a funerary thing, a grave goods. So anyway, that's my heart. I'm so old-fashioned, I'm back from the 1880s. I probably belong in the Renaissance. So anyway, that's another term that we have, the material term. Now we come on to the latest and the last term. There aren't even any books on this, because we've gone beyond books now. We've gone into PDFs. PDF, what does that mean? Does it mean portable document format? No. In programming terms, it means practically does fuck all. Because when the internet goes down after the Third World War, we're not going to have any of this shit left. We will, however, have lots of books. So, that's what I call PDF. Practically does fuck all. What do we mean now? We have the sensory term. We now have the sensory term. So that is everything now is about the senses. And it's about the 5 senses. So there is no psychic sixth sense. There are maybe 100 senses, they say, as they can't actually agree upon what the senses are. And everything's to do with the senses. So now very many people will write papers in classical studies, and they will look at, say, Pericles' funeral oration in the writings of Thucydides. And they will say, what were people smelling when they were in the audience? Or how did they feel when Pericles delivered this? Or what were they tasting when they did it? It doesn't actually fucking matter at all what they tasted when they were eating a snack listening to Pericles talk about the greatness of Athens. It doesn't fucking matter, but it seems to matter to the entire academic community that are going down this kind of brick wall cul-de-sac that doesn't lead anywhere except back to where they began, i.e. nowhere, and they're all hooked on this Kool-Aid. They are seriously hooked on it. Like, if you were studying classical studies now, you'd think that nothing existed in the ancient world that didn't exist to stimulate our sensory apparatus. They are completely consumed by the sensory turn. And so we've gone beyond the material now, and it's now all about the senses. So they do these big essays to do with hearing and acoustics, or they do the sense of sight, or they do the sense of smell, or they do the sense of touch or taste. One of the papers I read, it was about touch, and the person went into the museum, wasn't allowed to touch any of the objects. And she did a whole essay on touching objects that she wasn't allowed to touch. How does that work? It doesn't work. Okay? So that's where we're at. We've gone from the Renaissance, through the Enlightenment, right the way through all these various trends of Marxism and nationalism and processualism and new archaeology and post-processualism, postmodernism, to the material turn, and then finally ended up in the sensory turn, which is where we are at now. And if you study a master's degree at university to do with classical studies, nowadays it's all about the senses. Everything is about the senses. And there's nothing that didn't exist that wasn't about the senses. And that's just the way things are. Now, I can't disagree with it, because if I do disagree with it, I get marked down. Because they say, it's a social construct. This is a cultural script. This is complex complex society. It's a cultural change, and they use these words. And nuanced. Nuance is the big one. It has to be nuanced. They won't actually tell you what nuance means or how to go about being nuanced, but they'll just say it has to be nuanced. And so you have to do what they say. If they say jump through the hoop of fire into the bucket of gasoline, you jump through the fire into the gasoline burning. You have to do that. That's what you do now, you know. And so that's how you get top marks. And it's also why I chose disembodied invisible spirits for my final dissertation, because I was out to say, well, maybe there's something to do with the world that's beyond our normal senses, because it's all about the body. Everything's about the body. The sensory turn is wedded to the body. So we look at ancient bodies. Even a star is a heavenly body, and everything's to do with the body, and it's all corporeal. And I was thinking, well, maybe the body's like the lowest. That's just like our gross, mundane senses. Maybe in the Hermetic tradition, there is something beyond the body, and there is a true enlightenment arising up out of the body, perhaps even an out-of-body experience that might mean that with this new perception that is done through meditation and focus over very many years, that you may be able to conjure or commune with spirits. And then the scientists from the archaeology laboratory say, but this is a social construct, there's no evidence for this, I tried it once. It's because they have no faith. As Heinrich Agrippa Cornelius von Nettesheim wrote in his book De Occulta Philosophia, if you don't believe in it, the magic will never work anyway. So using the scientific method to try and prove or disprove that magic exists will never work, because from the word go, you're never going to believe in it. You're a skeptic. You're grounded in reality. So that's why we live in the Dark Ages, and this is how classical studies has ended up in the cul-de-sac that it's ended up in, because today all that matters is materialism, the senses, and the body. And if you say anything in your essays that is other than materialism, the senses, and the bodies, you will be marked down. And you will not fail, but you will not be given tenure, you will not be allowed distinction, you will just be cast aside. So people who are forward-thinking today and open-minded and are the scholars of tomorrow, the future thinkers, they are nothing today. But in 100 years, in 200 years, in 300 years, when people look back at this time and think, my God, were they that stupid then? That is how will be seen. When the people that were overlooked, the people that were more foresighted, the people that were more forward-thinking, they will be seen as the undiscovered, underrated underlings. The people that had no standing, no say, no profile, no platform, nothing. People that get like 0 views. People that the secret intelligence services have gone in and given a number which is 0. When I had my copyright dispute with Google, right? I had a copyright dispute because I had 46,000 hits on my Lou Reed cover, Walk on the Mild Side, and I deleted it because they started putting adverts, and I didn't want adverts on any of them. I don't like adverts. Adverts make people angry, and so they got into an argument with me, and I deleted everything. I intended to re-upload it, but I deleted it all. But ever since then, they have just basically put 0 views, 15 views, 13 views on all of my videos, and I've seen it because I was thinking, how can I totally have a total? I took some screenshots of 100 views when I've got over several thousand. And it's what Google do, and what the secret intelligence services do, is they just put 0 on it because they don't want these people being famous. They don't want these people saying things because they think they're a danger, they're a threat to their order, because they say things that don't agree with their worldview, or they maybe know too much. They've maybe read too many books. They maybe don't want them knowing about this because they want to keep it hidden because they think that the Russians or the Chinese will get hold of it or whatever. These fucking idiots, you know, that's what they do. And I remember that my last video, for example, was how to plan and write a classical studies essay. Now this is going to be very important for people that are going to be studying classical studies next semester. So you think that out of the millions of people that watch YouTube, that one person may have watched the video. Oh no, 0 views, like 0. Yeah? I put it on my Facebook profile, which only has 500 friends. That's got over 100 hits, really, 100 views. So you can't tell me that the millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people that watch YouTube, that no one has seen my lecture on how to plan and write a classical studies essay, because it's what the people, the administrators at Google, what Sundar Pichai and the Secret Intelligence Service, that's the NSA, the CIA, it's what they say, is what they like. So they like me to play slide guitar. So they go, oh, we'll give that a few thousand views because he's playing his slide. And we like that one because that's a good try. It's Leonard Skinner. We like that one. But anything that's important, anything that's of high quality, anything that is going to be seen as forward thinking in the future, long after we're dead, those, no, they don't get any traction, because this is the Dark Ages. It's the age of deception. Anyway, that's rant over. That's how classical studies has been changed, and we're basically still stuck in the Enlightenment. And when you go to study your classical studies degree at university, just remember, God is a social construct. There is only the body. There is only materialism, and everything is about the senses. And if you disobey any of those things, you will be seen as an outcast and a crazy person. So you must never believe in God. Never. Never. A university never believe. Don't even mention it. Right? Everything is to do with the body. There is nothing that isn't to do with the body. Everything's to do with the body and the senses and materialism. So never say anything enlightened. Never say anything that is kind or spiritual or to do with the heart doctrine. Just talk about materialism, the body, the senses, and that is it. Everything is a social construct. The sky is a social construct. The pebble is a social construct. Even if it's not a social construct, call it a social construct, because that's what they want to hear.